Hello, welcome to WireMock Cloud Academy. As the number of stubs grow inside of a mock API, the mock API can become cumbersome to maintain. Users may prefer to externalize the matching criteria and response data into a separate asset to manage their data scenarios more easily. WireMock Cloud allows you to attach a CSV file to a mock API to achieve this. Today, I will demonstrate using WireMock Cloud's Data Source feature. You'll find the Data Sources feature in the left-hand navigation screen of WireMock Cloud. We click on that Data Sources link, and it opens a list of the data sources that are available to us. To create a new data source, we click the Create a New Data Source button, click the Choose a File button, upload a CSV file, and then it's imported automatically. We can set the field type for each one of the columns to our liking. And then we give this a name. We'll call this one Demo. With it saved, it now becomes available to us in our list. If we open up Demo 1, you'll also notice that we can share this with our colleagues, much like we can with mock APIs as well. Now I'll show a few examples of how to use a data source in a mock API. In our first example here, we have a simple get for thing1 endpoint. And in our data sources pane, you'll notice that we have the options of selecting a data source. This time we'll use users. And we have the option to specify an ANSI SQL where clause. So in this case, we'll look in the premium column of the data source for any value that is set to true. And in our response, we've enabled dynamic response templating, and we'll simply return all of the lines for that ANSI SQL where clause. We can test this out inside of our test requester, and we'll see that all of the data items are returned in a collection of JSON format. Let's look at a more involved example. Come back into our data sources demo 2, where we have several different options here. In our first example, we'll get a count of all the records that are returned. So this is the get for /users count. Again, we've enabled our data sources. This stub will only match if it finds data based on the ANSI SQL where clause of the data source called users indexed. But we have no ANSI SQL where clause, so this will return the entire data set. And in our response, again, dynamic response templating is enabled. We can return the number of records either by using data.items.length or data.items.size. So we can go ahead and send this and see that we get 20 records back in this particular data source. Another example here is getting a random user. Again, this is a get on /user. We'll reference the user's indexed data source. We'll only match this stub if the where clause returns information. So this time we'll be looking up inside of the ID column of the CSV file, and we'll pick a random integer between 1 and 20. And down in the response body, again with dynamic response templating enabled, we'll return a user's collection, and then using the each handlebar helper, look at all of the items that are returned in data.items from that ANSI SQL where clause, and then parse through those to build out our user object. So we'll use the username column for the username item here, user ID, first name, last name. We can test this out and see when we send this, we get Brian Brady. We send it again, Tanya Bowen, and so forth. Our next example is to pull out a specific user. In this case, again, this is going to reference the data source user's index, and we'll do our ANSI SQL where clause on the first name column, and we'll reference the query parameter called first name, looking for that user inside of the data source. And if that data source contains that user, we'll use that same body dynamic response templating approach to build out the user collection. So if we come up here and send a first name of Jill, we'll see that this record is not found in the data source. So this stub actually didn't match. Instead, this stub matched, where we're still referencing the user's indexed. There's no where clause. It has a lower priority of 6, so it's the last to match. We can see that no record was found in the data source. But if we come back to that get a user and test it with a first name that actually does exist inside of that data source, we can see that we successfully get JSON back, as there's only one JSON in that data source. In our last example here of using the data sources feature, you can see in this particular get all users request, we're going to reference the user's index data source with no where clause, so we should get all the records back in this case. We'll use that dynamic response templating format to loop through every record that's returned to build out our user object inside of the user's collection. Try this out, send this, and notice we get our entire collection from our data source in this particular response. Thanks to the each handlebar helper, coupled with the unless at last argument, we can see that even the last comma is omitted from the response. As you've just seen, WireMock Cloud's data source feature allows you to externalize the data you use for request matching and response building. Try it yourself with a free forever account at wiremock.io.